June 12, 1944, somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean. The transport ship pitched violently, and I grabbed the railing to keep from falling. Salt spray stung my face. Around me, 300 German prisoners, mostly Luftwaffe and Wehrmacht, captured in North Africa and Italy, stood in silence, watching the horizon. We were heading to America, to imprisonment, to what we'd been told would be brutal captivity under savage conditions. My name is Margaret Schmidt. I am 26 years old, a Luftwaffe communications officer captured at Monte Cassino in May 1944, and until 2 weeks ago, I believed Americans were barbaric, revenge-seeking monsters who would torture German prisoners. If captured, my commanding officer had told us before the battle, expect no mercy. The Americans will make you pay for every bombing, every battle, every German victory. Die fighting rather than surrender. I surrendered anyway, and I was wrong about everything. If you're ready to hear a WYT story that will shatter everything you think you know about POW camps, smash that subscribe button and hit like. Drop a comment. Did you know German POWs were held in America? Most people don't. Let's uncover this hidden history. Now back to June 1944. I wasn't supposed to be a soldier. I was supposed to be a school teacher in Hamburg, teaching literature and language to children who would grow up in the 1,000-year Reich. But the Reich needed communications officers, needed women to free up men for combat. So I learned Morse code, radio operation, signal protocols. I learned to decode messages under fire. I learned that war looked nothing like the propaganda films. By 1943, I was stationed in Italy. By early 1944, the Allies were pushing north. Monte Cassino became a meat grinder, both sides feeding soldiers into a battle that achieved nothing except death. On May 18, 1944, our position was overrun. My commanding officer was dead. Half our unit was dead. The remaining soldiers were boys, 17, 18 years old, who'd been conscripted 3 months earlier and didn't know how to surrender properly. I made the decision, raised a white flag made from someone's torn undershirt, stepped out with my hands raised, shouting in broken English, "We surrender. Wir ergeben uns." The American soldiers who captured us were professional, efficient. They disarmed us, searched us, zip-tied our hands. One soldier, a medic with kind eyes and a Kansas accent, treated a shrapnel wound in my leg that I hadn't even noticed in the chaos. "You're lucky," he said in terrible German. Could have been worse. Lucky. I'd just been captured by the enemy, was being shipped to a prison camp in a country I'd been taught to hate. But I was alive when so many weren't. Maybe that was lucky. June 15, 1944. Arrival in New York Harbor. The Statue of Liberty rose from the morning mist like something from a dream. I'd seen pictures in school, before they'd removed all American imagery from our textbooks. But nothing prepared me for the scale, the green patina, the torch raised high. "Give me your tired, your poor," I whispered in English, remembering the inscription I'd learned before the war. Before everything changed, a British guard nearby raised an eyebrow. "You speak English?" "Some. I studied before." I stopped. Before the Nazis made English education illegal, before we were taught that Anglo-American culture was degenerate and weak. "Well," he said, not unkindly, "you'll get plenty of practice where you're going." We docked in New Jersey. We're loaded onto trains, regular passenger trains, not cattle cars. That surprised me. I'd expected boxcars, cramped conditions, deliberate cruelty. Instead, we had seats, windows we could see through, guards who were watchful but not violent. The American landscape rolled past, green hills, vast farms, small towns with white churches and tidy houses. It looked nothing like the bombed-out cities I'd left behind in Europe. No rubble, no burned buildings, no craters. The war hadn't touched this country, not really, and I began to understand what we'd done, dragging them into a conflict that was destroying our continent while theirs remained pristine. June 17, 1944, Camp Swift, Texas. The prison camp sat in rolling Texas hills, surrounded by barbed wire and guard towers. Rows of wooden barracks stretched in neat lines. American flags snapped in the hot wind. We were processed in shifts, fingerprinted, photographed, interviewed. I expected interrogation, maybe torture. The propaganda had been very clear about American brutality toward prisoners. Instead, I got paperwork. A captain, middle-aged, balding, with the demeanor of a bored accountant, asked me basic questions. Name, rank, service number, unit, date of capture. You speak English well, he noted, writing carefully. Thank you. You'll be assigned to a barracks with other female POWs. There aren't many, maybe 40 women in this camp, mostly Luftwaffe auxiliaries like yourself, he stamped a form. You'll receive Geneva Convention treatment, 3 meals a day, medical care, recreation time, work assignments if you volunteer. Paid work. I stared at him. Paid? 80 cents a day in camp scrip. You can use it at the canteen for toiletries, cigarettes, snacks. He looked up. The Geneva Convention requires that POWs who work receive compensation. Paid work. In a prison camp. While Germany was forcing slave labor from millions of prisoners across Europe, the irony was so thick I could barely breathe. June 18th, 1944. First morning. The wake-up call came at 6 a.m. A bugle, not a scream or a beating. I dressed quickly in the gray POW uniform they'd issued. Trousers, shirt, jacket, all with PW stenciled in white letters on the back. Breakfast was in a mess hall that could seat 200. Long tables, metal trays, American guards supervising but not hovering. The food shocked me more than anything else so far. Scrambled eggs. Real eggs, not powdered substitute. Bacon. Toast with butter. Actual butter. Not the rancid margarine we'd been eating for years. Coffee that smelled like coffee. Fresh fruit. I sat down with my tray, hands shaking slightly, and stared at more food than I'd seen in a single meal since 1941. First day, a woman across from me spoke in German. She was older, maybe 40, with short dark hair and amused eyes. I'm Helga, captured in Tunisia last year. Margaret, Italy, May. I picked up my fork, not quite believing this was real. Is the food always? Yes, 3 meals a day. More food than we had in the Wehrmacht by 1943. She bit into her toast. Welcome to American captivity. It's not what they told us, is it? No, I managed. It's not. June 20th, 1944. The routine settled quickly. Morning roll call, breakfast, work assignments for those who volunteered. I didn't volunteer at first. Wasn't sure if working for the enemy was collaboration or pragmatism. But I was bored and curious. The camp library surprised me most. An actual library with books in German and English, technical manuals, literature, newspapers, censored, but still newspapers. The guards even had a small collection of American magazines. I spent hours there, reading everything I could. American novels, technical journals, Life magazine with its glossy photographs of an America untouched by bombs. One afternoon, a guard found me reading Hemingway's For Whom the Bell Tolls. That's a good one, he said. He was young, maybe 22, with an easy Texas drawl. His name tag read, Wilson. You read English pretty well. I studied before the war. Before it was forbidden. What else did they forbid? I thought about that. Everything good, eventually. Wilson leaned against the bookshelf, not threatening, just talking. Why'd you surrender? I mean, we heard Germans were supposed to fight to the death. Because I was 26 years old and didn't want to die for a war we were losing. I closed the book. Because the boys with me were 17 and 18 and deserved a chance to live. Because sometimes surrender is braver than suicide. He nodded slowly. Yeah, I reckon that's true. June 25th, 1944. The letter. A lieutenant came to my barracks holding a clipboard. Schmidt, Margarete? Yes, sir. You're cleared for correspondence. You can write 1 letter per week. Maximum 1 page. Will be censored before sending. Any questions? I stared at him. I can write home. Geneva Convention, Article 71. Prisoners of war shall be allowed to send and receive letters and cards. He handed me a form. Fill out the recipient's information. We'll provide paper and envelopes. My hands shook as I wrote my mother's address in Hamburg. If Hamburg still existed. The last letter I'd received, 3 months ago, before capture, said the bombing was getting worse, buildings collapsing, food running out. But my mother was alive then. That night, I sat at the barracks table with a piece of American paper and a pencil, trying to figure out what to say. Dear Muti, I am alive. I am a prisoner of war in America. Texas, they tell me, though I have no idea where that is. I am healthy. I am fed. I am treated according to Geneva Convention standards. I know you must be worried. I know Hamburg is suffering. I wish I could be there to help you, but I cannot. All I can do is survive here and hope that when this war ends, I can come home. The Americans are not what we were told. They feed us well, give us books, let us write letters. I don't understand it, Muti. After everything we've done, the bombing, the invasions, all of it, they treat us like human beings. I think about that a lot. Stay safe. I love you. Your daughter, Margaret. I handed the letter to the censor the next morning. He read it, nodded, stamped it, put it in an envelope. We'll get this out with the next mail run, he said. Might take a while to reach Germany. Mail routes are complicated right now. Thank you, I whispered. Hey. He looked up. I hope your mother gets it. I hope she's okay. The kindness in his voice nearly broke me. July 1st, 1944. I volunteered for work, partly for the money, mostly for something to do besides think. They assigned me to the camp hospital. Administrative work, helping translate when German POWs needed medical care. My English was good enough, and they were short-staffed. The American doctors treated German prisoners exactly like American soldiers. Same care, same attention, same antibiotics and painkillers and surgical interventions. I watched an American surgeon spend 4 hours reconstructing the hand of a Wehrmacht corporal who'd been injured in a failed escape attempt. 4 hours of delicate work on a man who'd literally been trying to escape. Why? I asked the nurse afterward. He tried to run. She looked at me like I'd asked why the sky was blue. Because he's a human being with an injured hand. What else would we do? July 10th, 1944. A response came from my mother. It had taken 3 weeks, the letter passing through military censors, international mail systems, across an ocean and a continent. The envelope was worn, stamped multiple times, but intact. Inside, 1 page in my mother's careful handwriting. Margaret, I wept when I received your letter. 3 months without word. I thought you were dead. Hamburg is difficult. The bombing continues. We have little food, but we survive. I am glad you are in America. I know that sounds strange. Glad my daughter is a prisoner of war. But at least you are safe. At least you are fed. At least you are away from this hell. Write when you can. Knowing you are alive makes everything bearable. All my love, Muti. I read that letter 20 times that first day. Kept it under my pillow. Proof that my mother was alive. Proof that I hadn't been forgotten. Proof that love could survive war, and distance, and imprisonment. July 15th, 1944. The realization. We were allowed to listen to radio broadcasts. Censored news. Mostly music. The guard said it was for morale, to prevent total isolation from the world. I heard about the Allied progress in France. The bombing of German cities. The Eastern Front collapsing. Week by week, the news made it clearer. Germany was losing. We'd known it in Italy. Known it as we retreated, as supplies dwindled, as the orders became more desperate. But hearing it confirmed, week after week, it settled into my bones. Germany was going to lose. The Reich was dying. Everything I'd been taught about German superiority, about our inevitable victory, about the weakness of our enemies, all lies. And I was sitting in a Texas prison camp, well-fed and safe, while my country burned. The guilt was overwhelming. You okay? Helga found me in the library, staring at nothing. We're losing. Yes. My mother is in Hamburg. The RAF is bombing Hamburg. I know. And I'm here. Eating eggs, reading books, writing letters. I looked at her. How do you live with it? Helga sat down heavily. By accepting that we can't fix it. We can't stop the war. We can't save everyone. All we can do is survive until it's over, and then go home and help rebuild. If there's anything left to rebuild, there will be, she said firmly. There's always something left. That's what humans do. We rebuild. August 1st, 1944. I started teaching English classes to other German POWs. The Americans encouraged it. said anything that kept prisoners occupied and learning was good for morale. 30 men and 5 women showed up to the first class. Some wanted to learn for practical reasons, easier to work if you understood the guards. Others were curious. A few admitted they were planning for after the war, assuming they'd need English in whatever world emerged from the ashes. "Why are you teaching us the enemy's language?" one young soldier asked. He was 19, captured in Sicily, still angry about imprisonment. "Because enemies don't stay enemies forever," I said. "This war will end. Germany will lose. And when it's over, we'll need to communicate with the people who defeated us. Might as well start learning now. That's defeatist talk. That's realist talk." I wrote "hello" on the blackboard. "You can learn English now, while you're fed and safe and have time. Or you can refuse out of pride and be unprepared for whatever comes next. Your choice." He stayed in the class. September 5th, 1944. I received my second letter from my mother. This one took 5 weeks. The mail was getting slower as the war intensified. "Dearest Margaret, your letters are my lifeline. Keep writing, even if my responses are delayed. Even if you think I won't receive them. Just knowing you are thinking of me helps. Hamburg is worse. I won't lie to you. Many buildings are gone. The Miller family, you remember them from church? Died in the last raid. Food is scarce, but we persist. I think often about what you wrote, that the Americans treat you well, that they follow rules even in war. I confess this surprises me. We were told so many terrible things about them. Perhaps we were lied to about many things. Stay strong, Liebling. This will end eventually. Mutti, perhaps we were lied to about many things. That sentence echoed in my head for days. October 10th, 1944. The work crew I'd joined was helping harvest cotton on a nearby farm. The Geneva Convention allowed POW labor as long as it wasn't military work, and prisoners were paid. Cotton harvesting qualified. It was hot, back-breaking work. But it was also outdoors, physical. Something to do besides sit in camp thinking about the war. The farmer who owned the land was an older man named Mr. Jackson. He treated us fairly, provided water, allowed breaks, paid the agreed rate through the camp administration. One afternoon he brought lemonade. Real lemonade, cold from ice, sweet and tart. "Y'all work hard," he said in his thick Texas accent. "Figured you deserved something cold." We drank it gratefully, German prisoners and American guards sitting together in the shade of a cotton wagon, sharing a moment of peace in the middle of a world war. "Mr. Jackson," I asked, "why do you hire us? We're your enemies." He thought about that, squinting at the horizon. "Well, I suppose technically you are. But sitting here drinking lemonade, you seem like just people who need work, and I need workers. War's happening somewhere else. Here, we got cotton to bring in. But your country is fighting mine. Yeah, and I hate Hitler. Hate what he's done. But you ain't Hitler. You're just a girl who got caught up in something bigger than yourself." He finished his lemonade. "Besides, Geneva Convention says I gotta treat you fair. And I was raised to follow the rules." November 11th, 1944. Armistice Day. The Americans marked the day with a ceremony, remembering the First World War, honoring veterans. Some German prisoners attended, curious or bored or genuinely interested in American customs. A chaplain spoke about peace, about sacrifice, about the hope that wars would eventually end and people would learn to live together without killing each other. "Some of you," he said, looking directly at us German prisoners, "are enemies of America. Your country started this war. Your government committed terrible crimes. Those are facts." We shifted uncomfortably. "But," he continued, "you are also human beings, sons and daughters, brothers and sisters, people who were born into circumstances you didn't choose and made decisions you can't undo. And while you're here, under our care, we will treat you as human beings. That's our choice." After the ceremony, I found myself talking to the chaplain. "Sir, why? After everything, after Pearl Harbor, after the U-boats, after all the Americans who've died fighting us, why treat us well?" He smiled sadly. "Because if we become monsters to fight monsters, then the monsters win. We have to remain human, even in war. Especially in war." December 1st, 1944. Winter in Texas was mild compared to German winters, but the barracks had heat. We had blankets, had warm clothes. My mother's latest letter mentioned freezing in Hamburg. No coal, no heat, burning furniture to stay warm. And I was warm, comfortable, safe. The guilt never went away, but I was learning to live with it, learning to accept that I couldn't save my mother from Germany while imprisoned in America. All I could do was survive and write letters and hope. December 25th, 1944, Christmas. The Americans celebrated with decorations, music, a special meal. They even set up a Christmas tree in the mess hall, a scraggly pine, but decorated with paper ornaments and tinsel. They served turkey, mashed potatoes, vegetables, pie. More food than many of us had seen at Christmas in years. A small group of German POWs organized a carol service. We sang Stille Nacht in German, voices rough but earnest. Some American guards joined in, singing Silent Night in English. Same song, different languages. Former enemies finding common ground in music older than our current hatred. Guard Wilson stopped by my table. "Merry Christmas, Schmidt. Merry Christmas, Wilson. You doing okay?" "I know it's hard, being away from family on holidays." "Yes," I said, and then, honestly, "But I'm alive, I'm fed, I'm warm. My mother in Hamburg has none of those things, so I can't complain too much." "Well," he said, "maybe next Christmas you'll be home. War can't last forever." "No," I agreed, "it can't." But I wasn't sure there would be a home to return to. January 15th, 1945. News filtered in about the Eastern Front. The Soviets were advancing. Germany was collapsing from the east, while the Americans and British pushed from the west. We were being crushed. The 1,000-year Reich was dying after 12 years. Some prisoners still clung to propaganda about miracle weapons, about Hitler's genius, about inevitable German victory, but most of us could see the truth. It was over. We'd lost. And sitting in that Texas prison camp, well-treated and well-fed and alive, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Grief for my country's destruction, relief that the killing would finally end, guilt for being safe while others suffered, and something unexpected, gratitude. I was grateful to have surrendered, grateful to be here rather than in a Soviet prison camp, or dead in an Italian field, or still fighting a hopeless war. Grateful that my enemies had chosen to treat me like a human being. February 1st, 1945. My English class had grown to 50 students. We'd progressed beyond basics to actual conversations, reading American newspapers, discussing culture and customs. "Why do Americans smile so much?" one prisoner asked. "Even the guards, they smile." "Germans don't smile like that. Cultural difference," I explained. "Americans see smiling as polite, as friendly. We Germans see it as fake or inappropriate, but they do it even when they're guarding prisoners. Yes, because they can separate the war from the person. They know we're enemies, but they also see us as people. So they treat us with basic courtesy." The prisoner shook his head. "I don't understand them." "Neither do I admitted, "but I'm grateful for them." March 10th, 1945. A letter from my mother arrived heavily censored, whole paragraphs blacked out. What remained was brief. "Margaret, censored. The city is censored. So many gone. Censored. But I am alive. Your letters keep me alive. Keep writing. I love you, Moody." I held that letter and wept, not knowing what had been censored, not knowing how bad things were, knowing only that my mother was still alive. For now. April 12th, 1945. President Roosevelt died. The news spread through camp quickly. I expected celebration among the German prisoners, the enemy's leader dead. Instead, there was mostly silence, even confusion. Some prisoners had grown to respect Roosevelt through American newspapers and radio broadcasts. He'd been a constant throughout the war, the American face of the Allied effort. The American guards were genuinely devastated. Some wept openly. Work stopped for the day. Flags flew at half-mast. Guard Wilson sat in the library, not even pretending to supervise, just staring at nothing. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. He looked up, surprised. "You're sorry? He was your enemy. He was your president. And you're sad." I can be sorry about that without changing my feelings about the war. Wilson managed a small smile. You're all right, Schmidt. For a German prisoner, you're all right. You're all right too, Wilson. For an American guard. April 30th, 1945. Hitler was dead. Suicide in his bunker as Berlin burned. The news came over the radio, confirmed by American reports. The camp went silent. Some prisoners refused to believe it. Some wept. Some looked relieved. I felt empty. The man who'd started this war, who'd promised us greatness and delivered only death and destruction, had taken the coward's way out. He'd sent millions to die while he hid in a hole and killed himself, rather than face justice. How do you feel? Helga asked that night. Angry, I said. Angry that he did this to us. Angry that we followed him. Angry that he doesn't have to face what he's done. At least it's almost over. Yes, but what comes next? Neither of us had an answer. May 8th, 1945. VE Day. Victory in Europe. The war in Europe was over. Germany had surrendered unconditionally. The Third Reich was finished. The American Guards celebrated quietly. No wild parties, just relief. The war with Japan continued. But their European war was done. We German prisoners sat in our barracks, processing the loss. Our country had been defeated, occupied, divided. Millions dead. Cities destroyed. Everything we'd known. Gone. And I was in Texas, alive and healthy, while my mother faced an uncertain future in occupied Germany. I wrote her that night, Dearest Moody, the war is over. We lost. I am still a prisoner, but I am safe. I don't know when I'll be released. I don't know when I can come home. I don't even know if there's a home to return to, but I'm alive. You're alive. That has to be enough. I hope to see you soon, however long it takes. All my love, Margaret. That night, lying in my bunk, I thought about the last year, about surrender, about captivity, about the unexpected humanity I'd found in enemy hands. And I realized I'd been wrong about Americans, wrong about surrender, wrong about everything I'd been taught. The monsters I'd feared were people. The captivity I'd dreaded was bearable. The enemy who should have brutalized me had treated me with dignity. I didn't know what came next, but I knew this. The world was more complicated, more merciful, and more human than propaganda had ever suggested. And that was both terrifying and hopeful in equal measure. May 15th, 1945, 1 week after VE Day. The war in Europe was over, but we remained prisoners. No one knew when we'd be released, when we'd go home, or what home even meant anymore. Letters from Germany painted a nightmare. Cities in ruins, millions of refugees, no food, no infrastructure. The country divided into occupation zones. The Soviet zone was especially terrifying. Rumors of brutality, rape, forced labor made even American captivity seem preferable. My mother's letters came sporadically now, each one more desperate. Margaret, Hamburg is unrecognizable. The British occupation is strict but fair. We have little food. Many women are leaving for the countryside to find work, food, anything. I'm too old to leave. I wait for you. Please come home when you can. I wanted to go, but I also dreaded it. June 1st, 1945. The camp administration announced a new policy. German POWs could volunteer for extended work programs. Instead of immediate repatriation to a destroyed Germany, prisoners could remain in America, working for wages, rebuilding lives before facing the devastation at home. It's not mandatory, the commandant explained at assembly. Anyone who wants to go home immediately will be processed for repatriation as soon as possible. But those who volunteer for labor programs can stay up to a year, earning money to send home or save for your return. I looked around at the assembled prisoners. Young men, mostly, boys really, who'd been captured at 18 or 19 and were now 20 or 21. What did they have to return to? Destroyed cities? Dead families? No jobs? No homes? No futures? At least here they were fed. Safe. Could work and earn money. I'm staying, Helga said that night in our barracks, at least for a while. My husband is dead. My home in Dusseldorf is rubble. What's the hurry? Your family. My mother is dead. My sister is in the Soviet zone. I can't reach her anyway. I'm 42 years old with no home, no husband, no prospects. She lit a contraband cigarette. In America, I can work, earn money, learn English properly, go home when there's actually something to go home to. I thought about my mother, alone in Hamburg, waiting for me. But I also thought about arriving with nothing. No money, no resources, just another mouth to feed in a starving city. Maybe staying a few more months, earning money, learning skills. Maybe that was the responsible choice. June 20th, 1945. The decision. I volunteered for the extended work program. 6 months, with possibility of extension. The guilt was crushing. My mother needed me. But the pragmatism was undeniable. I could send money home through the Red Cross, could arrive in Hamburg with resources instead of just another burden. I wrote to explain my decision. Dearest Mutti, I know you want me home. I want to be home. But Germany is destroyed, and I would arrive with nothing to offer you. Instead, I've volunteered to remain in America for 6 months, working and earning money. I can send most of my wages to you through the Red Cross. Please understand, this is not abandonment. This is me trying to help you survive. I will come home, I promise. But I will come home with something to offer besides just myself. Your loving daughter, Margaret. The response took 6 weeks. Margaret, I understand. I don't like it, but I understand. The money you can send will help more than your presence. Hamburg needs rebuilding. When you come home, we will rebuild together. Stay safe. Learn what you can. Come home when you're ready. I love you, Mutti. July 1945. I was assigned to work in the camp administration office. Clerical work, translating documents, helping process repatriation paperwork for prisoners who were going home. My English was fluent now. My typing skills solid. The work was tedious but important. And I was paid. Real American dollars. $40 a month. An incredible sum. I sent 30 home to my mother, kept 10 for necessities and small comforts. The American staff treated me like a colleague rather than a prisoner. They asked about my life in Germany, about my family, about my hopes for the future. They showed me photos of their families, shared coffee during breaks, invited me to birthday celebrations. One secretary, Mrs. Robertson, brought me a cake on my birthday. 27 years old, she said warmly. You're so young. You have so much life ahead of you. Thank you, I managed, moved almost to tears by this kindness from a woman whose country I'd been at war with 18 months earlier. August 6th, 1945. The atomic bomb fell on Hiroshima. 3 days later, another on Nagasaki. Japan surrendered August 15th. The war, the entire war, was finally over. The American Guards celebrated with relief. No more war, no more fighting. They could go home. Their friends and brothers in the Pacific could come home. We German prisoners watched with complicated feelings. Relief that the killing had stopped, horror at the weapon's power, fear of what this meant for the future, and something else, the realization that America had won. Completely. Decisively. They had weapons we couldn't even imagine. Resources we couldn't match. An industrial capacity that had crushed both Germany and Japan. We'd never had a chance. September 1945. Letters from Germany were arriving more regularly now. My mother's tone was changing. Still desperate, still difficult, but with hints of adaptation. The British are organizing food distribution. It's not much, but it's something. I've found work cleaning offices in the occupation administration. The pay is minimal, but it helps. Your money arrives irregularly, but when it does, it's a godsend. Hamburg is slowly coming back to life. People are clearing rubble, rebuilding, finding ways to survive. We Germans are good at surviving, but I miss you terribly. When will you come home? Soon, I wanted to say. But every time I thought about going back, I felt overwhelmed. Here, I had purpose. Work, safety, 3 meals a day. In Germany, I'd have rubble and rationing and the constant reminder of our defeat. I wasn't ready. October 1945. Guard Wilson was being discharged. The war was over, and he was going home to his family in Texas. I'm going to miss this place, he said, which was an insane thing to say about a prison camp. You'll miss guarding German prisoners? I asked. I'll miss the people I met. You, for instance. He smiled. You taught me that enemies are just people on the other side of a line someone else drew. That's worth knowing. You taught me that Americans aren't monsters. We're really not. Mostly we're just folks trying to get by. He extended his hand. Good luck, Schmidt. I hope Germany treats you better than Germany treated you. I shook his hand. This young American who'd guarded me for over a year and never once been cruel. Thank you, Wilson. For everything. Thank you for surrendering. If you died fighting, we wouldn't have had these conversations. And I think these conversations mattered. After he left, I cried. Not from sadness exactly, but from the strangeness of it all. Crying because an enemy guard had been kind. Because war had ended and people were going home. Because I'd found humanity in the last place I expected it. December 1945. Christmas again. My second Christmas in captivity. But it felt different this year. The war was over. Prisoners were being processed for repatriation steadily. The camp population was shrinking as men and women returned to Germany. Helga was staying through spring. One more winter in a warm barracks with regular meals, she said. Then I'll face German winters with no heat. I'd extended my stay through March 1946. Partly for the money, partly because I wasn't ready, partly because I'd built a life here, small and circumscribed, but a life nonetheless. The Christmas meal was generous. Turkey, potatoes, vegetables, pie. The American staff ate with us, guards and prisoners together, sharing food and conversation like the war had never happened. Captain Morrison, the camp commandant, raised a glass of cider, to peace, to going home, and to the strange friendships we've built in this strange time. To peace, we echoed. January 1946. I received a package from my mother. It had taken 3 months to arrive, but it made it. A hand-knitted scarf, a small photo of her looking thin but alive, and a letter. Margarete. This scarf is made from yarn I unraveled from an old sweater. It's not much, but I wanted you to have something made by my hands. Hamburg is cold. Food is still scarce, but we persist. The British are maintaining order. There's talk of rebuilding, of economic plans, of Germany's future. I'm proud of you for working, for sending money, for surviving. But I want you to know, you don't have to fix everything before you come home. You don't have to arrive with money or plans or solutions. I just want my daughter back. Come home when you're ready. But come home. With all my love, Moody. I held that scarf and photo and wept. Not from sadness this time, but from love. My mother, starving in Hamburg, had sent me a gift. Had told me it was okay to come home imperfect. Maybe I was ready after all. February 15th, 1946. The departure date. I requested repatriation for April 1946. Time to settle my affairs, finish my work assignments, say goodbye to the people and place that had unexpectedly become home. Mrs. Robertson was disappointed. We'll miss you in the office. You've been wonderful. Thank you for treating me like a person. Well, you are a person. She hugged me, an American woman hugging a German former prisoner. I hope Germany is kind to you. I hope you find your mother healthy. I hope you rebuild a good life. I hope so too. March 1946. Preparing to leave. I taught my last English class. 20 students remained, the last holdouts before repatriation. We'd progressed far beyond basics. Now we were discussing American literature, debating politics, preparing for a world where English would be essential. What will you do in Germany? One young man asked. He was 22, captured at 19, educated in captivity. Find my mother. Help rebuild Hamburg. Maybe teach English there. I'm qualified now. I smiled. What about you? I don't know. My hometown is in the Soviet zone. I can't go there. Maybe I'll stay in the West. Find work. Start over. He looked around the classroom. This place taught me something. That you can start over. That enemies can become, not friends exactly, but not enemies anymore. That's the lesson. I agreed. Maybe that's the lesson of this whole war. March 25th, 1946. Final letters. I wrote my last letter from America. Dearest Moody, I am coming home. I will arrive in Hamburg approximately mid-May, depending on transport and processing. I have money saved. Not much, but something. I have skills. English, typing, administration. I have hope, which seemed impossible 2 years ago. I've spent nearly 2 years as a prisoner in America. It was not what I expected. They treated us with dignity, fed us, paid us, let us write letters, followed rules even when they could have broken them. I learned that enemies are human, that following rules matters even in war. That mercy is possible even after terrible violence. I'm bringing these lessons home. Maybe they'll help us rebuild. I'll see you soon. I love you. Margaret. April 5th, 1946. Departure day. The bus left Camp Swift at dawn. 40 German prisoners, processed for repatriation, heading to the port in New Jersey for the ship back to Europe. I looked back at the camp. The barracks where I'd slept for nearly 2 years. The mess hall where I'd eaten better than I had in Germany since 1941. The library where I'd learned that Americans read books and had culture, and weren't barbarians at all. Helga squeezed my hand. Strange to be sad leaving a prison camp. Very strange. Will you miss it? Yes, I admitted. Is that wrong? I don't think so. This place kept us alive, kept us human, gave us time to heal from the war before facing the aftermath. She looked out the window as Texas rolled past. That's worth being grateful for. April 20th, 1946. New York Harbor. The Statue of Liberty looked different now. When I'd arrived as a prisoner in June 1944, she'd represented enemy territory, captivity, punishment. Now she represented something else. A country that had held me prisoner and treated me with unexpected mercy. We boarded the ship for Europe. Former prisoners, now repatriates, heading back to a continent we barely recognized. Germany was occupied, divided, devastated. But it was home. The Atlantic crossing took 12 days. Rough seas, crowded conditions, but nothing like the fear of the outbound journey. Then, I'd expected torture and death. Now I knew better. May 2nd, 1946. Bremerhaven, Germany. We docked in Bremerhaven, American occupation zone. Processing took days. Paperwork, medical checks, travel documents. Germany was divided now. American, British, French, and Soviet zones. Moving between zones required permissions, documents, explanations. I was cleared for Hamburg, British zone. They gave me travel papers, a small amount of German marks, and directions to the train station. Good luck, the American processing officer said. He was young, maybe 23. Probably hadn't even been in combat. I hope you find your family. Thank you for everything. We were just doing our jobs. You were doing more than that, I said. You were being human. That's not the same as just following orders. He looked surprised, then smiled. Yeah, I guess you're right. May 5th, 1946. The train to Hamburg. The German countryside was scarred. Bombed bridges, destroyed towns, burned forests. Evidence of war everywhere. People at stations looked thin, hungry, desperate. Children begged. Women searched through rubble. This was the Germany I'd left in 1943, but worse, so much worse. We passed through the British zone. Signs in English. British soldiers manning checkpoints. German civilians adapting to occupation. I thought about the German occupation of other countries. France, Poland, Russia. The brutality, the cruelty, the disregard for human life, and now we were occupied, experiencing what we'd inflicted on others. There was a terrible justice in that. May 6th, 1946. Hamburg. The train pulled into Hamburg Hauptbahnhof, or what remained of it. The great station was a burned shell, partially rebuilt, functional but damaged. I stepped onto the platform with my single suitcase, everything I owned in the world, and looked at my city. Hamburg was gone. The buildings I'd known, the streets I'd walked, the neighborhoods I'd grown up in. Destroyed. Firebombed in 1943. Damaged throughout the war. Now a landscape of rubble and makeshift repairs. People moved through the ruins like ghosts. Thin, exhausted, defeated. This was home. May 6th, 1946. 3:47 p.m. My mother's apartment. The building still stood, damaged but standing. So many weren't. I climbed the stairs with shaking legs. The door to apartment 2B opened before I could knock. My mother stood there, thin, gray, aged 10 years and 2. And for a moment we just stared at each other. Then she pulled me into her arms and we both sobbed. "You're home," she kept saying. "You're finally home." "I'm home," I agreed. The apartment was bare. Most furniture gone, sold or burned for heat. The windows were broken, covered with boards. The walls showed water damage, but it was still standing, still home. "It's not much," Moody apologized. "It's enough." I held her hands, thin, work-worn, showing her age and hardship. "We'll rebuild. Together." May 1946, the first week's home. Adjusting to Hamburg was harder than adjusting to Texas had been. In Texas, I'd had food, safety, purpose. In Hamburg, I had rubble, rationing, and crushing guilt. Guilt for having been fed while my city starved. Guilt for being safe while Hamburg burned. Guilt for the small part I'd played in a war that had destroyed everything. But I also had skills. English, fluent now. Typing, administration. The British occupation needed translators, clerks, administrators. I found work within 2 weeks. The pay was minimal. Occupation wages in a collapsed economy. But it was something. And the British officers, when they learned I'd been a POW in America, treated me with a strange respect. "You were at Camp Swift?" one major asked. "Yes, sir. June 1944 through April 1946. Good camp. Treated prisoners properly. We've heard stories, Germans who stayed voluntarily, who didn't want to come back to this mess." He gestured at the ruins visible through the window. "Can't say I blame them. I came back for my mother. That's admirable." He looked at my file. "You speak excellent English. Better than most Germans. We could use you in the translation office." June 1946. I started teaching English classes in the evenings. Hamburg residents trying to learn the occupiers' language for practical reasons. Work, trade, survival. One student, a woman about my age, asked, "You were in America? As a prisoner?" "Yes." "What was it like?" I thought about how to answer. Better than expected. "They followed the Geneva Convention, fed us, paid us for work, let us write letters home." "But they were your enemies." "Yes, but they treated us like human beings anyway." "That's important." Another student, older, bitter. "They destroyed our cities, killed our soldiers, and now they occupy us." "You speak as if they're heroes." "They're not heroes," I said carefully. "But they're not monsters either. They're people who fought a war and won and are now trying to figure out what to do with us. We can hate them, or we can work with them to rebuild. Hate won't reconstruct Hamburg. September 1946. I received a letter. From America. From Mrs. Robertson, the secretary I'd worked with. "Dear Margaret, I hope this finds you well, and that you found your mother healthy. We all miss you at the office. You were always so pleasant and hardworking. I wanted you to know. The camp is closing. The last prisoners shipped out in August. Camp Swift will be decommissioned and the buildings dismantled. A chapter is closing. But I want you to know it mattered. Your time here mattered. The friendships we built mattered. You changed how I think about Germans, about enemies, about war. I hope Germany treats you well. I hope you rebuild a good life, and I hope you remember that not all Americans are your enemies. Some of us became your friends. With warm regards, Eleanor Robertson." I cried reading that letter. Then I translated it for my mother. "She sounds kind," Moody said. She was. They all were. That's what I keep trying to tell people. The Americans weren't monsters. They were just people. We were told they would torture prisoners, starve them, brutalize them. They told us many lies, I said. That was one of them. December 1946. My second Christmas in Hamburg. Last year I'd been in Texas, warm and fed, feeling guilty about being comfortable. This year I was home, cold and hungry, feeling guilty about having been comfortable. Moody and I shared a meager meal, potatoes, some vegetables from the British rations, weak coffee, nothing like the feasts at Camp Swift. "Do you regret coming home?" Moody asked. I thought about it. No. This is where I belong, but I'm grateful for those 2 years in America. They kept me alive, gave me time to learn, to heal from the war, to prepare for this. "Do you think Germany will recover?" "Yes," I said firmly. "We Germans are stubborn. We survive, and we have help. The Americans, British, even the French. They could have destroyed us completely. Instead, they're helping us rebuild. Why? Because they learned from the last war. Because they want a stable Europe. Because," I paused, thinking of Wilson and Mrs. Robertson and all the Americans who'd treated me with unexpected kindness, because some people choose mercy over revenge. And that makes all the difference. 1947. Rebuilding. Hamburg slowly rebuilt. Rubble cleared. Buildings rising. Infrastructure restored. The British occupation was strict but fair. Food improved gradually. Life adapted to the new normal. I continued teaching English. The demand was enormous. Everyone needed English to work with the occupation, to trade, to function in the new Germany. One evening, a student asked, "Fräulein Schmidt, do you think Germans and Americans can be friends, after everything?" "Yes," I said. I was a prisoner in America. They were my enemies, but they treated me with dignity, and I learned that enemies aren't permanent. Circumstances change, people change, relationships change, but they bombed us. And we bombed them first, at Pearl Harbor, and in our raids on England. I looked around the classroom. We all did terrible things, all of us. Germans, Americans, British, everyone. The question isn't who did worse things, it's what we do now. Do we cling to hate, or do we try to build something better? 1948, the Berlin airlift. When the Soviets blockaded Berlin, the Americans and British responded with an airlift, flying in supplies to keep West Berlin alive. Hundreds of flights per day, thousands of tons of food, coal, supplies. I followed the news closely, watched American planes flying overhead, heading to Berlin, bringing supplies to Germans, to their former enemies. "Why?" Moody asked. "Why help us?" "Because," I said, "the alternative is letting Berlin starve, and they've decided that's unacceptable, even for their former enemies." It was the same principle I'd experienced at Camp Swift, treating enemies with basic human dignity, because the alternative was becoming monsters ourselves. 1949. A letter from Texas. A package arrived from America. Inside, a letter from Guard Wilson, now just Tom Wilson civilian, and a photograph. "Dear Margaret, I hope this reaches you. I think about Camp Swift sometimes, about the war, the prisoners, the strange friendships we built. I'm married now. Got a job working construction. Life is good. But I wanted you to know something. Knowing you changed how I see the world, made me understand that enemies are just people. That's important. I hope Hamburg is treating you well. I hope Germany rebuilds. And I hope you're teaching people that Americans aren't monsters, because you taught me Germans aren't either. Your friend, Tom Wilson." The photograph showed him with his wife, both smiling, standing in front of a house he'd probably helped build, living proof that carpenters rebuild after war's end. I wrote back that night, "Dear Tom, your letter reached me. Thank you for remembering me. Thank you for being kind when you didn't have to be. Hamburg is rebuilding. Slowly, but steadily. I teach English. Trying to build bridges between our countries, one student at a time. You asked if I'm teaching people that Americans aren't monsters. I am. Because I learned it from you, and people like you. You showed me that following rules matters, that mercy is possible, that enemies can become friends. That's the lesson I'm passing on. With gratitude, Margaret." 1950, 5 years after the war. Germany was transforming. The Federal Republic was established in the West. The economy was recovering. The economic miracle beginning. Hamburg was being rebuilt, modern and new, rising from the ashes. I was 32 now. Had a good job with the British administration. Taught evening English classes to packed rooms. Had helped my mother rebuild her life. We'd survived. One day, a young student, maybe 19, born in 1931, a child during the war, asked me, "Fräulein Schmidt, is it true you were a prisoner in America?" "Yes." "What was it like?" I thought about how to answer, about the complexity of those 2 years, the fear and relief and guilt and gratitude all mixed together. "It was difficult," I said. "Being away from home, not knowing if my family was safe, but the Americans treated us fairly, fed us, paid us for work, let us write letters. They followed rules even when they could have broken them. Why? Because they chose to. Because they believed that even enemies deserve basic human dignity. Because they knew that the choices they made during the war would affect the peace that came after. Did it work? I looked around the classroom, at Germans learning English from a former POW, at a city rebuilding with American economic aid, at a country being helped by its former enemies. Yes, I said. I think it did. 1955. 10 years after the war. My mother died peacefully in her sleep at 71. She'd lived to see Hamburg rebuilt, lived to see Germany recover, lived to see me establish a good life. At her funeral, I spoke about survival, about resilience, about the mother who'd waited for her daughter to come home from captivity, who'd endured occupation and hunger and loss, who'd rebuilt her life in the ruins. She taught me, I said, that we survive not by clinging to the past, but by building for the future, that enemies can become neighbors, that mercy matters, that we have choices even in impossible situations. After the service, an older British officer approached me. Mrs. Schmidt? Fräulein, I corrected. I'd never married. Too busy rebuilding. Fräulein. I knew your mother slightly. She worked in our offices briefly after the war. She was proud of you. Thank you. And I wanted to say thank you for teaching English, for helping bridge our cultures, for being someone who chose to move forward instead of staying stuck in bitterness. I learned it in America, I said, in a prison camp in Texas, from guards who treated me with unexpected kindness. He nodded slowly. The best of us chose mercy. I'm glad you experienced that. And I'm glad you're passing it on. 1960, 15 years after the war. Germany was prosperous now, an economic powerhouse, a democracy, an ally of America and Britain, the very countries we'd fought. I was 42, still teaching, still translating, still building bridges, had trained dozens of translators, taught English to hundreds of students, helped shape the next generation of Germans who would grow up partnering with former enemies. One evening, a student asked, Fräulein Schmidt, do you ever regret not staying in America? You could have. Some prisoners did. I thought about it, I admitted. But Germany is my home. My mother was here. And I felt I owed something to my country, to help rebuild what we'd destroyed. Do you think it was worth it? Coming back to the ruins? Yes. Because ruins can be rebuilt. And we've rebuilt something better than what was destroyed. A democracy. A peaceful nation. A partner to our former enemies. I smiled. That's worth more than personal comfort. 1965. 20 years after the war. I received an invitation to a reunion. Former POWs from Camp Swift gathering in Hamburg. About 20 of us, scattered across West Germany, gathering to remember the strange time we'd spent as prisoners in America. We met in a restaurant. Well-fed, well-dressed, successful Germans. All of us had rebuilt our lives. All of us had contributed to Germany's recovery. Helga was there, now 65, retired, grandchildren. Can you believe it? 20 years since we left Texas. It seems impossible. Do you think about it? The camp? Yes. Often. I think about how they treated us. How they could have been cruel and chose mercy instead. I looked around at the gathered former prisoners. I think it changed all of us. Made us believe that mercy was possible, that enemies could become partners. It shaped how we rebuilt Germany, another former POW said. We came home having seen democracy work, having experienced what it meant to follow rules, to treat people fairly, to build instead of destroy. We brought those lessons home. Did we pass them on? Someone asked. Look at Germany, I said. A democracy, peaceful, partnered with America and Britain. I'd say yes, we passed it on. 1975. 30 years after the war. I retired from teaching at 57, had spent 30 years building bridges, teaching English, training translators, helping Germans and Americans understand each other. On my last day, students and colleagues gave me a gift, letters of appreciation from people I'd taught over the decades. Diplomats, business people, teachers, ordinary Germans whose lives had been improved by learning English. One letter stood out, from a former student now working at the American Embassy. Fräulein Schmidt, you taught me more than English. You taught me that enemies are just people we haven't learned to see yet, that mercy matters, that the choices we make after conflict determine whether peace lasts. Thank you for those lessons. Thank you for showing us how to move forward. That night, I read through all the letters. Thought about the journey from Luftwaffe communications officer to prisoner in Texas, to English teacher in rebuilt Hamburg. Thought about the American guards who'd been kind, the British officers who'd been fair, my mother who'd survived against all odds. And I felt grateful to have survived, grateful for the unexpected mercy I'd received, grateful for the chance to pass those lessons on. 1985, 40 years after the war, Germany celebrated 40 years of peace, the longest period without war in modern European history. The European Union was growing. Germany and its former enemies were partners, allies, friends. I was 67, watching the commemorations on television. They interviewed a former American POW guard, not Wilson, but someone like him. "Why did you treat German prisoners well?" the interviewer asked. "Because they were human beings," he said simply. "Because we believed in following rules even during war. Because we knew the war would end someday, and we'd have to live with the choices we'd made." That's what they'd understood, I thought. That mercy wasn't weakness. It was strategy. That treating enemies well didn't mean approving of what they'd done. It meant choosing what kind of victors they wanted to be. And it had worked. 40 years of peace proved it had worked. 1990. The Berlin Wall falls. I watched on television as the wall came down. Germany reuniting. The Cold War ending. The final chapter of World War II finally closing. I was 72, and I wept. Wept for all the years of division. Wept for the end of that division. Wept for the impossible journey from 1945 to 1990. We'd survived, rebuilt, reconciled, become partners with our former enemies, created a peace that had lasted longer than anyone thought possible. And it had started with small choices, with American guards choosing to follow Geneva Convention rules, with prisoners like me choosing to learn from enemies, with both sides choosing to see each other as human. Small choices. Massive consequences. 2000. 55 years after the war. I was 82, living in a comfortable apartment in rebuilt Hamburg. The city bore almost no scars from the war. Just memorials, museums, plaques marking where buildings had once stood. A young journalist interviewed me for an article about German POWs in America. "What do you want people to know about your experience?" she asked. "That mercy matters," I said. "That following rules matters even in war. That the choices we make about how to treat enemies determine whether peace lasts." I paused. "And that enemies aren't permanent. They're just people on the other side of a temporary line. Do you think the Americans did the right thing? Treating you well?" "Yes, because look what came from it. 60 years of peace and partnership. If they'd brutalized us, we'd have come home filled with hatred and desire for revenge. Instead, we came home having experienced mercy, and we built a Germany that chose democracy and peace and partnership." Was it hard? Being grateful to your enemies? Very hard, I admitted, but necessary. Because gratitude and respect aren't the same as forgetting what happened. We can acknowledge the terrible things done during the war while also acknowledging the good things done during the peace. 2005, 60 years after VE Day. The 60th anniversary of the end of World War II brought ceremonies, commemorations, reflections. Germany and America held joint events celebrating 60 years of partnership. I was invited to speak at one, former German POW, now 87, reflecting on the journey from enemy to ally. 60 years ago, I said, standing before an audience of Germans and Americans. I was a prisoner in Texas. I expected brutality. I received mercy. That experience changed my life and shaped how I understood peace. I looked around the audience. The guards who treated me well did more than follow rules. They invested in peace. They showed that even after terrible war, people could choose humanity over revenge. That choice, repeated by thousands of guards and prisoners, created the foundation for the partnership we celebrate today. So I want to thank the American guards who chose mercy. Thank the administration that followed Geneva Convention rules. Thank the people who understood that how you treat prisoners matters for what comes after the war. And I want to challenge everyone here. In your conflicts, personal, political, national, remember that enemies are temporary, that the choices you make during conflict determine whether peace lasts. Choose mercy. Choose humanity. Choose to see your enemies as human, because healed people heal people. And 60 Years of Peace proves it. 2010. My final letter. I was 92. In failing health. Writing what I knew would be my last letter. Not to my mother. Gone 25 years. Not to Tom Wilson. Dead 5 years earlier, I'd learned from his daughter. But to the next generation. To those who come after. I was Margaret Schmidt. I was a German soldier, captured in 1944. Held prisoner in America for nearly 2 years. I expected torture. I received mercy. That mercy changed everything. Not just for me, for Germany, for Europe, for the world. Because how we treat enemies matters. Because mercy invested in peace. Because small choices by ordinary people can create massive change. I'm writing this in 2010, 65 years after the war. Germany is democratic, prosperous, peaceful. America is our partner, our ally, our friend. The very country I fought against now stands with us. This didn't happen by accident. It happened because people chose it. Chose to follow rules during war. Chose to show mercy to prisoners. Chose to invest in rebuilding instead of revenge. So here is what I learned in 92 years. Enemies are not permanent. Propaganda lies. Mercy is strategic. Following rules matters even when you could break them. How you treat prisoners determines whether peace lasts. And healed people heal people. Pass these lessons on. Because the next war, if there is a next war, will need people who understand that mercy matters, that enemies can become partners, that small acts of kindness can prevent massive future conflicts. Choose mercy. Always choose mercy. With hope for your future. Margaret Schmidt, former prisoner, former enemy, eternal advocate for peace. Epilogue. 2012. Margaret Schmidt died peacefully on March 15, 2012, at age 94. Her funeral in Hamburg was attended by family, former students, and a delegation from the American embassy. The American ambassador spoke. Margaret Schmidt was our enemy. She fought against us. We captured her and held her prisoner. And in that prison camp, both sides made choices that shaped the next 70 years. We chose to follow Geneva Convention rules, to treat her with dignity, to show mercy even after brutal war. And she chose to learn from that mercy, to teach English, to build bridges, to pass on the lesson that enemies can become partners. Those choices, on both sides, created the peace we enjoy today, created the partnership between our nations, created a Europe where war between former enemies seems unthinkable. Thank you, Margaret, for surrendering instead of dying, for learning instead of hating, for teaching instead of seeking revenge, for showing us that mercy works. If this story moved you, if it changed how you think about enemies, about POWs, about mercy during war, then subscribe right now. Hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, because this isn't just history. This is a blueprint for how to handle conflict, for how to treat people we're at war with, for how to build peace that lasts decades. Margaret Schmidt was a German prisoner who received unexpected mercy, and she spent 60 years proving that mercy was worth it, that it created peace, that it changed the world. So here's my challenge to you. Who are your enemies? How are you treating them? What kind of peace are you building? Because every act of mercy is an investment in future peace. Every time you choose humanity over hatred, you're creating a better world. Remember, healed people heal people. But first, someone has to choose healing. What will you choose? Subscribe, share, comment, tell me how this story changed you, and then go build the peace that comes next. Because that's what Margaret Schmidt would have wanted. This story is based on documented experiences of German POWs held in America during WWAT, including interviews, historical records from the War Department, and verified accounts of camp conditions. While Margaret Schmidt is a composite character, her experiences reflect thousands of real stories. Over 425,000 Axis POWs were held in the U.S., 1942-1946, treated according to Geneva Convention standards, with many expressing surprise at the humane conditions.